For our project, we decided to look at the NFL performance and weather conditions. Our executive summary, so we looked and made the question, does temperature affect the amount of points forced in a season? Our measure was points forced and temperature. Our data was performance results from the NFL teams during the 2015-2017 NFL seasons. Our method was a paired t-test and a regression model. And our conclusion was that temperature is not related to points forced. Our question was, does a team's average home temperature affect the amount of points scored by the NFL team during the 2000-2017 season? Our hypothesis was, we believe that teams that play in home games of weather below the league temperature average, which was 44 degrees, then their points scored will be less than that of a team that plays in above average temperature, which is above 44 degrees. Therefore, we believe a team playing in cooler weather will have a lower winning percentage overall.
The analytics problem framing, we looked into two questions. The first one being, does having an indoor stadium affect your points for the overall year? The second being, do points for affect a team's winning percentage? The measures we took were the average temperatures of each home team's location and during the season, and then also the points forced for each franchise during the season. Assumptions made were all games were considered, indoor stadiums were set at 70 degrees Fahrenheit. The skill level amongst all teams were equal, and then finally there was normality in the data.
So for the data, we used the Pro Football Reference Guide. This data got data from the years 2015 throughout the 2017 year span. And in the rows, as you can see, is all 32 teams for each year. And then the columns, which are 11 factors that, I guess, take into consideration the performance. So like wins, losses, points for, points against. And then on the right, you see the data for the average temperatures throughout the months, November through January. After we cleaned the data and decided which factors were most relevant to our analysis, we came up with that the three variables that we were going to look more closely at were the wins of each team, the points forced, or the points they scored throughout the entire season, and then the average temperature the team played in.
So our methodology was, we knew we need to use two paired t-tests for our data, so we could compare each team's averages back to the total averages for points for and win percentage. We also used a regression model to then plot out total wins versus total points for. Also, we then looked at total points for versus the average temperature for each team. We also used some residual plots then to also give us a better idea of our data and possible predictions of win percentages for each team. Our model was the temperature of the team, the model we used was we used average temperatures of home stadiums for teams from November through January in 2015 to 2017. Variables we used were points for and average temperature at the home stadium, also the win to loss average win percentage, like we stated. Alternative variables we considered were specific games for temperatures at each stadium, point difference, and preseason rankings. We found that a few of these variables we really need to use, especially preseason rankings, was pretty irrelevant for our data.
To conclude, we did a simple linear regression where we performed a model between average temperatures and points forced. We got an R-squared value of just 3%, which is very low. So we can conclude there is no relationship between average points and temperature. This 3% shows the variability of regression for our data set, which ultimately is very low, like I said. In addition, we performed a t-test using the means win percentage as well as mean temperature. we calculated the two-tail p-value of just 0.7352. Therefore, we failed to reject our null hypothesis, given the evidence that home temperature does affect the win percentage.
Looking back on the two questions we asked earlier, does having an indoor stadium increase points for us? For the average points of the league, it was 1,077 points for all 32 teams. We looked at the 8 teams that have indoor stadiums, and then we used this graph to determine the point variation from the total average. And we decided that 5 of the 8 were higher than the average, or 62.5%. So we can say that there's a small positive correlation. Also looking, do points force affect the team's winning percentage? There's a small positive relationship with this model that we calculated that predicts points in a season based off of wins. The R-squared value was 65.14%, which covers 65.14 percentage of the data. And then the biggest weakness we established for our test was our sample size, as it only runs over a 3-year period. Our best resolution to that would be to find a data set that covers about a decade or so we can more closely evaluate this data.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to our presentation. Please.